It's June 6, 1944. 01:15 hours. 28 miles off the Normandy coast, paratroopers from the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment are crammed into C-47 transport planes, flying at 1,500 feet through heavy cloud cover. Private First Class David Kenyon Webster, Easy Company, can feel the aircraft shaking as German anti-aircraft fire starts punching holes through the fuselage. The green light hasn't come on yet. The jumpmaster is yelling something, but the engine noise drowns it out. Then the flak gets worse. Pilots break formation. Some climb to 2,000 feet to escape the fire. Others drop to 300 feet, trying to get under it. The neat V formations that left England 3 hours ago no longer exist. Every pilot is fighting to keep his aircraft in the air, and the paratroopers inside don't know if they're over the correct drop zone, the English Channel, or downtown Berlin. The 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 2,056 men commanded by Colonel Robert Sink, is supposed to land on Drop Zone C, just north of the French village of Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. Their mission is straightforward on paper. Secure the 4 causeways leading inland from Utah Beach, destroy artillery positions at Brécourt Manor, and prevent German reinforcements from reaching the beaches. These aren't optional objectives. If the causeways aren't taken, the 4th Infantry Division coming ashore at Utah Beach will be trapped on the sand, easy targets for German artillery. Thousands of lives depend on paratroopers who are supposed to be organized into cohesive units, operating according to a carefully planned timetable. Instead, the 506th is about to be scattered across 25 square miles of occupied France. When the green light finally comes on, sometimes too early, sometimes too late, men jump into darkness. Some land in flooded fields and drown, weighed down by 80 pounds of equipment. Others land in trees, hang suspended 30 feet in the air, and get shot by German patrols. Many land miles from their designated drop zones. Within 90 minutes of the first jump, the 506th PIR has effectively ceased to exist as an organized regiment. No company is at full strength. Most platoons can't find their officers. Radio equipment is lost, broken, or at the bottom of a flooded field. By 03 hours, Colonel Sink has assembled fewer than 200 men from his entire regiment, less than 10% of his force. He has no idea where the other 1,800-plus paratroopers are. Some are dead, some are captured. Most are scattered across the Norman countryside, trying to figure out where they are, where their units are, and what the hell they're supposed to do now. The math is simple and brutal. The 506th has lost tactical cohesion before firing a shot. Standard military doctrine says a unit becomes combat ineffective at 30% casualties. The 506th just became combat ineffective at 0% casualties. They simply can't find each other. And yet, every single one of their D-Day objectives will be completed. On time, under fire, at a cost that would break most units. This is the story of what that actually looked like. Before we get into the chaos of what happened next, real quick, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. What city? What state? What country? And hey, what time is it where you are right now? I'm always curious to see how far this history reaches. All right, let's get back to Normandy. Let's talk about what scattered across 25 square miles actually means in tactical terms. Drop Zone C was supposed to be a concentrated landing area, roughly 2 miles wide. Instead, paratroopers from the 506th landed everywhere from Sainte-Mère-Église, 8 miles north, to Carentan, 6 miles south. Lieutenant Richard Winters from Easy Company landed in the middle of a firefight near Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. Private Robert Burr landed in a tree, hung there for 2 hours before cutting himself down, and didn't find another American until dawn. Staff Sergeant William Guarnere landed in a hedgerow, immediately got into a close-range firefight with German sentries, and killed 2 before realizing he was completely alone. By sunrise on June 6th, Colonel Sink had managed to gather approximately 1,100 men, just over half his regiment. That sounds better than 200, but here's the reality. Those 1,100 men weren't organized into their original companies. Easy Company, which jumped with 139 men, could only account for 65. Dog Company had 58 men present out of 154. 2nd Battalion assembled with barely 40% strength. The unit cohesion that months of training had built was gone. Platoons were led by sergeants. Companies were led by lieutenants who'd never met half the men under their command. The Germans weren't scattered. The 91st Luftlande Division and elements of the 6th Parachute Regiment held prepared defensive positions throughout the area. They knew the terrain. They had pre-sighted artillery. Their machine gun nests covered every causeway, every road junction, every obvious approach. German commanders in the Cotentin Peninsula had spent months preparing for exactly this scenario, an Allied airborne assault, and their defensive plan was working perfectly. Scattered, disorganized paratroopers stumbling through unfamiliar terrain at night were easy targets. The hedgerows made everything worse. Normandy's bocage country consists of fields surrounded by earthen banks topped with dense vegetation, some over 6 feet thick. Each field is essentially a natural fortress. You can't see more than 100 yards in any direction. Artillery observers can't spot targets. Coordinated advances are nearly impossible. For the Germans defending, it's perfect. For American paratroopers trying to organize and maneuver, it's a nightmare. And the casualties kept mounting. Private John Eubanks, Fox Company, was killed by sniper fire at 5:30 while trying to locate his squad. Lieutenant Thomas Meehan's entire C-47 was shot down during the jump. All 18 men aboard died. First Lieutenant Robert Brewer, Easy Company executive officer, was killed during the assault on a German position near Culoville. These weren't abstract numbers on a casualty report. These were trained paratroopers, men who'd survived jump school and months of preparation, dying in the first 6 hours because the plan had completely fallen apart. By midday on June 6th, the 506th had taken over 150 casualties, killed, wounded, or missing. Standard doctrine says you pull a unit out of combat for rest and reorganization at 30% losses. The 506th was approaching 8% casualties and had barely started fighting. They still had 4 causeways to secure. They still had to assault Brécourt Manor. They still had to prevent German counterattacks against Utah Beach. And they had to do it with half-strength companies, broken radio communications, and officers who didn't know where most of their men were. The textbook said this was impossible. The Germans thought they'd already won. What neither the textbook nor the Germans accounted for was what happened when you gave highly trained paratroopers a clear mission and let them figure it out on their own. The solution to the 506th's tactical disaster wasn't elegant. It wasn't in any manual. It came down to something the Army had drilled into every paratrooper during training, but never expected to rely on this completely. Small unit initiative. Here's how it worked. When Lieutenant Richard Winters from Easy Company landed near Sainte-Marie-du-Mont with only 13 men from his platoon, he didn't wait for orders. He didn't try to find his company commander. He grabbed the soldiers nearest to him. Some from Easy Company, some from Dog Company, one guy from headquarters, and started moving toward the sound of gunfire. His reasoning was simple. Wherever Americans were fighting, that's where he needed to be. By 04 hours, Winters had assembled a mixed force of 19 men from 4 different companies. None of them were supposed to be working together. All of them knew their general objectives. That was enough. This pattern repeated across the entire drop zone. Staff Sergeant Carwood Lipton, separated from his platoon, linked up with 7 paratroopers he'd never met before, and led them to secure a section of Causeway 2. Private First Class John Plesha landed 3 miles south of his drop zone, found 2 men from Fox Company, and spent 6 hours working their way north, killing German sentries and cutting communication wires along the way. When they finally reached friendly lines, they'd accomplished part of their original mission, disrupting German communications without ever receiving orders. The 506th's training made this possible. Every paratrooper knew the regiment's D-Day objectives. Every soldier carried a map and compass. Every NCO had been trained to operate independently. When the chain of command dissolved, the mission didn't. Paratroopers simply formed ad hoc units based on whoever they could find and attacked whatever German positions were between them and their objectives. Colonel Sink recognized what was happening and embraced it. At 08 hours on June 6th, when he still couldn't account for half his regiment, he stopped trying to reorganize into proper company structures. Instead, he gave battalion and company commanders one directive: take whoever you have and complete your assigned objectives. He trusted his officers and NCOs to figure out the details. The Brécourt Manor assault at 08:30 hours became the textbook example of this approach. Lieutenant Winters, still commanding his scratch force of about a dozen men, identified 4 German 105 mm artillery pieces firing on Utah Beach from positions behind a hedgerow. Those guns were killing Americans on the beaches. The textbook called for a coordinated company-level assault with artillery support. Winters had 12 men, no radios, and no heavy weapons. He attacked anyway. Winters divided his tiny force into 3 groups. He used covering fire from one team to allow the second team to flank the first gun position. Once they took that position, they used the captured machine gun to provide fire support for the assault on the second gun. The entire action took less than 2 hours. Winters' group killed or captured the German gun crews, destroyed all 4 artillery pieces, and suffered 4 casualties, all wounded, none killed. The after-action report called it a textbook assault. The irony was that no textbook would ever recommend what Winters actually did: attack a prepared artillery position with 12 men and no support. But it worked because Winters understood something the Germans didn't expect. American paratroopers didn't need permission or perfect conditions to fight. They needed a target and a reason. By noon on June 6th, the pattern was clear. Small groups of 506th paratroopers were hitting German positions across the entire operational area. Not as a cohesive regiment, as dozens of independent teams who all understood what needed to be done. Between 09 quarts and 16 hours on June 6th, the 506th PIR executed what became known as the most successful regimental action of D-Day. Here's how it actually happened. Causeway 2, the northernmost route inland from Utah Beach, was the priority target. At 10:30 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Strayer assembled a mixed force of 75 men from Easy, Dog, and Fox companies. The causeway was defended by 2 German machine gun positions, a fortified farmhouse, and approximately 40 infantry from the 91st Luftlande Division. Standard assault doctrine called for a full battalion with armor support. Strayer had 75 paratroopers and no tanks. The assault went like this. Easy Company's remnants provided suppressing fire from hedgerow positions 200 yards north. Dog Company maneuvered through flooded fields, waist-deep water, men holding rifles above their heads, to flank the German positions from the east. The approach took 40 minutes. German observers spotted them twice, but the machine gun fire couldn't depress low enough to hit men in the water. At 11:15 hours, Dog Company emerged from the marsh directly behind the German positions and opened fire at 30 yards. The firefight lasted 8 minutes. 16 Germans were killed, 24 surrendered, the rest retreated. Causeway 2 was secure by 11:30 hours. American casualties: 7 wounded, 2 killed. Private First Class Robert Van Klinken, Dog Company, was shot through the chest during the final assault. He died before the medics reached him. While Strayer's force was taking Causeway 2, 1st Battalion was assaulting German positions around Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. Captain Richard Davis, commanding a scratch force of 60 men from Able, Baker, and Charlie companies, led a frontal assault on German defensive positions in the village at 13 hours. The Germans held 3 reinforced buildings and had pre-sighted mortar positions covering every approach. Davis split his force. One group provided covering fire, while the second moved building to building, clearing rooms with grenades and rifle fire. The village fell by 14:30 hours. Davis lost 11 men killed, 19 wounded, exactly 50% casualties. But Sainte-Marie-du-Mont was secure, and with it, the road network connecting all 4 causeways. At 15:45 hours, elements of the 4th Infantry Division's 8th Infantry Regiment reached Causeway 2 from Utah Beach. They'd expected to fight their way inland. Instead, they found the route clear, defended by exhausted paratroopers who'd been fighting for 14 hours straight. The link-up meant Utah Beach was secure. The 506th had done its job. But the Germans weren't finished. At 17:20 hours, a counterattack hit 2nd Battalion's positions south of Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. Elements of the 6th Parachute Regiment, approximately 200 men with armored car support, attempted to retake the causeways. They ran into defensive positions hastily prepared by Lieutenant Harry Welsh's platoon from Easy Company, reinforced by stragglers from multiple companies. Welsh had 38 men and 1 captured German machine gun. The German force outnumbered him 5-1. Welsh positioned his men in a hedgerow with interlocking fields of fire and waited. The Germans attacked in a textbook infantry assault, suppressing fire followed by a coordinated advance. Welsh's paratroopers held fire until the Germans were 75 yards away, then opened up with everything they had. The German assault shattered. They took 43 casualties in the first 90 seconds and pulled back. Welsh lost 5 men wounded, none killed. The counterattack failed not because of superior numbers or firepower, but because American paratroopers in defensive positions were impossible to dislodge without overwhelming force. By 21 hours on June 6th, every assigned objective was complete. All 4 causeways secured. Brécourt Manor artillery destroyed. German communications disrupted. Utah Beach linked with inland forces. The cost, 231 casualties, 65 killed in action, 166 wounded or missing. The success rate, 100%. The 506th PIR didn't get a break after D-Day. They continued operations throughout the Normandy campaign for 33 days straight. No replacements, no rest, no rotation off the line. By the time they were finally pulled back to England on July 13, 1944, the regiment had taken over 1,000 casualties from its original strength of 2,056 men. That's a 48.6% casualty rate. Nearly half the regiment was gone. Let's be clear about what those numbers represent. Every man who jumped into Normandy on June 6th knew roughly 2 other paratroopers from his stick, his platoon, or his company who didn't make it home. The statistical probability of surviving the Normandy campaign as a member of the 506th PIR was essentially a coin flip. And yet, across those 33 days of continuous combat, the 506th never failed a single assigned objective. The immediate tactical impact was measurable. Utah Beach's success rate, the lowest casualties of any D-Day beach, was directly tied to the 506th's performance. The 4th Infantry Division came ashore expecting to fight for every yard inland. Instead, they walked off the beach through secured causeways. Approximately 23,000 men landed at Utah on June 6th, with only 197 casualties. Those numbers exist because paratroopers died securing the routes inland before the beach assault even began. Strategically, the 506th's D-Day performance validated American airborne doctrine, but not in the way planners expected. The pre-invasion plan assumed paratroopers would land in organized units and execute coordinated regimental operations. That didn't happen. What did happen was that highly trained soldiers with clear objectives adapted to chaos and completed their missions anyway. The lesson wasn't that airborne assaults should be more precisely planned. It was that small unit leadership and decentralized execution were more effective than rigid command structures. Post-war analysis by the Army War College identified the 506th's D-Day operation as a case study in what they termed mission-type orders, giving subordinate commanders clear objectives while allowing them complete freedom in execution. This concept became foundational in modern American military doctrine. The entire idea that a sergeant or lieutenant should be empowered to make tactical decisions without waiting for orders from higher command traces directly back to what happened in Normandy when the command structure ceased to exist and the mission got done anyway. The human cost never gets easier to process. Private Van Klinken, killed at Causeway 2, was 21 years old. Lieutenant Meehan, who died when his C-47 went down, had a wife and daughter waiting in England. First Lieutenant Brewer was 3 weeks away from his 25th birthday. These weren't abstractions. They were men who trained together, jumped together, and died completing objectives that most military analysts thought were impossible under the conditions they faced. The 506th's perfect mission record on D-Day didn't happen because of superior firepower or numbers or equipment. It happened because 2,056 men understood what needed to be done and refused to quit until it was finished. The price was 231 casualties in 24 hours and nearly 50% losses over 33 days. The result was that every single mission assigned to the regiment was completed exactly as ordered. That's not propaganda. That's not mythology. That's just math. Brutal, unforgiving math that defined what airborne actually meant.